Hi, my name's Mariesa Herrmann, and I'm a senior reviewer for the Regional Educational Laboratory, or REL, peer review project, which Mathematica and our partners operate for the U.S. Department of Education's National Center for Education Evaluation and Regional Assistance, or NCEE. This video provides an overview of the NCEE guidance for REL study proposals, reports, and other products. I imagine you're watching this video because you'll be using the guidance in your work for stakeholders in your regions and communities. This video describes guidance that's been in place since before 2020, which you may be familiar with and which we expect will continue going forward. We'll provide an overview of this guidance, providing more detail and examples in the areas that might be more challenging. This video covers some of the key guidance at a high level. Please refer to the NCEE guidance for REL studies document for complete and detailed criteria. This video does not cover the new 2022 guidance for correlational studies or analysis of census data. That new guidance is described in memos and will be covered in an upcoming webinar. Those resources are listed on the last slide. Great, so let's dive right into the guidance. First, thank you for the work you are doing for the RELs. The RELs are a key part of the federal strategy for helping states and districts use evidence for improvement. One of the elements of this strategy is applied research that's grounded in the needs of education agencies and their communities. RELs have an opportunity and obligation to lead the field in developing products that are based in rigorous evidence, relevant for regional needs and decisions, useful, and accessible for policymakers and practitioners. We know this isn't easy. I've been a REL author too. The REL peer review team is here to help support you, and we're all learning and improving together. So in this video, we'd like to share some tips that we've learned and additional resources that could be helpful. In this video, we'll focus on the NCEE guidance for REL research proposals, reports, tools, and other products. We'll first talk about relevance and technical quality. Relevance means stakeholders need the product to inform decisions, while technical quality includes the use of appropriate designs, data, samples, and methods. Relevance and technical quality should be described in proposals and apply to all REL products. Turning to writing, this guidance helps ensure the product communicates information in a way that's clear and accessible for policymakers and practitioners. It applies mostly to reports, tools, and other products rather than proposals. Finally, the utility guidance only applies to proposals for tools and the tools themselves. It focuses on whether tools are easy to use. So now, let's talk about relevance for regional needs and decisions. In addition to describing who the stakeholders are and what they have requested, proposals and products should identify the regional need and specific action or decision that the product is intended to inform. For example, authors might note that state administrators need findings on the characteristics of principals associated with retention, mobility, and attrition to help determine which school leaders are most at risk of moving or leaving. That can inform their decisions what supports or incentives to provide to improve principal retention and recruitment, which have the potential to benefit students by improving access to effective school leadership. In addition, proposals and products should explain how the product relates to the need. REL research reports include a Why This Study section in which the summary of the literature should be brief, balanced, and draw on rigorous and current research to motivate the need for the product. The research questions should be clearly related to the stakeholder's need so the reader can understand how the answers to the questions are relevant and can inform state or district policy actions or decisions. For example, for a study to identify which types of principals might need supports or incentives to improve their retention, a research question might be, what characteristics of principals, their schools, and their districts were associated with the likelihood of principals moving to a different school or leaving a school leadership position rather than staying in a leadership position in the same school? Finally, ideally, proposals and products will explain how the product will be useful beyond the specific district, state, or REL region it was created for. To engage a more national audience, authors could describe how a study contributes to and fills a gap in the research base, and how the information could be useful in circumstances likely to be found in other regions. Next, we'll talk about technical quality. For technical quality, authors should first select a research design that does a good job of answering each of the main study research questions. The design's rigor should be balanced with simplicity, so the design can be clearly communicated to stakeholders. For example, suppose district staff wanted to understand which services for English learner students are promising for raising achievement. A simple descriptive study can simply compare the average achievement of students who receive different services, but these differences might also reflect substantial differences in the characteristics of students who receive these services. A correlational study that controlled for differences in the prior achievement and characteristics of the English learner students who receive different services would be more rigorous. Second, the study should use data that's appropriate and well aligned with the research questions. Authors should provide enough information about the data sources and variables that other researchers can assess the technical basis for the study. Authors should also describe the validity and reliability of survey measures. Proposals should include data collection instruments and describe data collection procedures that protect confidentiality of individuals and obtain informed consent when it's needed. Finally, proposals and reports should identify the population or universe of interest for addressing the research questions and discuss the representativeness of any samples. They should also describe how these samples were selected, confirm that subsamples are adequate to obtain precise estimates, and explain limitations of non-representative samples. For example, if district stakeholders are interested in understanding achievement for all English learner students in the district, authors should acknowledge the limitation of the samples that only includes English learner students who did not repeat any grades. Next, we'll discuss technical quality guidance for various analytic methods. Both the proposal and the report should describe analytic methods, but in the report, authors can provide a brief, user-friendly summary in the methods box with more technical details in an appendix. For studies that use quantitative methods, authors should describe the models and provide equations in the proposals and report appendices. All studies should test for statistical significance. The memo on census data and an upcoming webinar will focus on a recent change to the guidance, which is that studies should test for statistical significance even if you have census data or data on everyone in the population, not just a sample. Authors should also describe the procedures for testing statistical significance of differences across groups or observed changes over time. Authors can also collaborate with stakeholders to determine magnitudes of differences that are policy relevant and should define and use consistent terms to describe results with these magnitudes, defining small and large differences, for example. Authors should also describe methods for creating summary measures, such as using factor analysis or item response theory, and provide enough information that the results can be replicated. See the appendix to the guidelines for more information on creating summary measures. For qualitative studies, authors should describe systematic procedures for coding and analyzing data. These include coding protocols and plans for ensuring inter-rater reliability, identifying how qualitative data will be analyzed, and explaining the method for selecting quotes or vignettes. Authors should avoid generalizations in their interpretations of qualitative data and provide information about the extent of the activity, sentiment, or opinion that was described. In proposals and reports, the authors should describe limitations that prevent the study from providing the most accurate or relevant answers to the main research questions. These could include use of a sample that is not representative of the target population, data that does not cover the relevant period, variables that do not capture the intended construct, or inability to measure important factors that might account for differences in outcomes across groups. In reports, the implications should be directly supported by the study findings. Reports should explain how the key findings can inform specific stakeholder actions or decisions. Next, we'll describe how to address one potential limitation, missing data. Missing data can occur due to survey non-response, lack of parental consent for assessments, and unreported information in administrative records. It can lead to bias if sample members with data are not representative of the population of interest. Rates of missing data should be minimized, but when it's unavoidable, this guidance for descriptive studies can help improve the accuracy of findings for the population of interest. In proposals for descriptive studies, authors should identify key variables where a low percentage, less than 85% of the original study sample will have the data needed to answer the question. When response rates are less than 85%, authors should typically plan to conduct a non-response analysis if the findings need to generalize to the full sample that includes non-respondents, or the population the full sample represents. In reports, authors should conduct non-response analyses if response rates for samples that address the main research questions are less than 85% and present those non-response rates, at least in an appendix. These non-response analyses should compare sample numbers with data and the full sample, which includes both respondents and non-respondents, to assess if they differ by a substantial magnitude on other characteristics correlated with the key variables of interest. For example, suppose the full sample is all students in a grade, but less than 85% of students have post-test scores. Authors should compare the pre-test scores of students with post-test scores to the full sample of students to see if they differ by more than 0.05 standard deviations. If respondents in the full sample are similar, no missing data adjustments are needed. If the groups are different, authors should attempt to adjust for such differences. Authors could use a number of different adjustment methods, including multiple imputation, maximum likelihood, or non-response weights. If it's not possible to account for the differences, authors should carefully describe the population to which the findings apply and caution readers against generalizing findings to the full sample. See the appendix to the guidelines on addressing missing data for more details. For impact evaluations, randomized control trials, and quasi-experimental designs, the proposal and report should describe the goals of the program or policy being examined, the population served, and implementation details such as the amount of time for training, backgrounds of staff who conducted the training, and cost of the intervention. It's also important to describe the counterfactual, for example, the specific curriculum that the district used in absence of the intervention. The REL guidance for impact evaluations is similar to the What Works Clearinghouse, or WWC standards. For example, authors should examine attrition, baseline equivalence, and statistical power of their study. We encourage you to look at the most recent WWC standards at the time that you're developing your proposals. The WWC standards will also provide helpful guidance for systematic evidence reviews. Systematic evidence reviews need to assess the quality of the studies reviewed and describe the strength of the evidence associated with the reported findings. Reports, tools, and other products should be easy to read, so the NCEE guidance for REL research and the REL Writers and Style Guide provide a lot of guidance on writing. As a brief overview, authors should write in concise, plain language that the intended audience will be able to understand. The bold subheadings should capture key findings that answer your research questions, and the text below should clearly support those findings. Paragraphs should begin with strong topic sentences, and the rest of the paragraph should elaborate the point made by that topic sentence. Readers should be able to understand all of the main points of the report by reading just the headings and topic sentences. To keep paragraphs concise, authors can create new paragraphs for separate points. Finally, using bulleted lists and focused tables or figures to clearly display information can make this information more accessible and help break up long sections of text. It's also important for all of the information across the various sections to be well aligned. The report should present a consistent and aligned argument throughout the text, from the introduction to the research questions, findings, and implications. The Why the Study section should provide a clear motivation for the research questions and the decisions the study can inform. The Findings section should clearly map to and answer each of the research questions. The Implications section should describe how the key findings can inform the decisions identified in the introduction. This example shows a study on a professional development program on culturally responsive practices that was motivated by Wisconsin's need to understand the relationship between program participation and school outcomes, which could help inform program improvements and follow-up studies. The research question asks about the relationship between program participation and school outcomes. The findings indicate that there was no relationship, and the implications suggest that the state may want to consider determining how to improve this program. Now we'll talk about utility. To make tools easier to use, they should clearly describe the objective or task they're intended to help users accomplish. They should also reference and draw on evidence. For example, tools that are survey instruments could refer to documentation on the validity or reliability of survey items. And self-assessment checklists could refer to literature that supports the items on the checklist. Tools should resemble a step-by-step manual, including clear instructions that cover every step that users need to take to accomplish the stated objective. Examples or vignettes can also be very helpful to illustrate how to use the tool. Tools should clearly identify the intended users, and the instructions should be appropriate for the typical level of background knowledge that these users will have. Tools should also provide a realistic estimate of the time that users will need to use them. Estimates should also take into account participants' familiarity with the content, as beginners might require more time. Workshop resources should account for the size of the groups participating, as larger groups may need more time for sharing or reflection activities. Authors can refine these instructions and time estimates during development, for example, by piloting the tool with likely users. This slide provides a list of additional resources that may be helpful for supporting the quality of REL products. In addition to the NCEE guidance for the RELs, we have also recently developed 2 memos on draft guidance on correlational studies and analysis of census data, on which we are looking for your input. We will also have a webinar to cover this guidance and answer questions. There's also an IES guide on descriptive analysis in education that may be helpful. Finally, there's a couple forthcoming resources from IES that may be helpful. A new version of the Writers and Style Guide, new WWC 5.0 guidelines, which update the WWC 4.1 guidelines. If you have any feedback or questions, let your cores know and they can pass it along to us. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing your excellent work for educational agencies and communities.